Hi, I'm Glenn Rogers, and this is American Perspectives. Our video today is about the state versus the Constitution. What happens when the U.S. Constitution says you have a right, and then the state comes along and says, well, yeah, you have that right, but we're moderating it a little bit so that you have that right the way we want you to have that right? Okay, what happens when that sort of thing happens? Well, unfortunately, nothing happens. So far in our history, Congress basically does nothing. They just let that happen. Well, can that be right? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. But first, before we get into that, I want to ask you to help us out by subscribing to our channel. There's a little button down there below. Just click that, and that would be very helpful to us. It doesn't cost you anything. Nobody will bother you, but it would be very helpful to us. So that'd be great if you could do that. So what is this thing about the state versus the Constitution? I want to start by asking this. What is one of, if not the most important jobs that government has? Well, we're going to start today with a quote from the Declaration of Independence. This is right from the beginning, and you've heard it before. It's not something new. It will be familiar to you. But it has these words, starts with these words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Now, what does that mean? To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. It sounds to me like what it's saying, and you can decide if you agree or not, but it sounds to me like what it's saying that is one of the fundamental purposes of government is to secure the rights of the people. We have certain God-given rights, and they are unalienable, means they can't be taken away. And it's the government's job to make sure that those rights are secure, that we have them, and that we can live our lives utilizing those lives without the threat of those rights being infringed in any way. And yet today, state governors are allowed to close churches, infringing on our freedom of religion. The Congress allows media corporations to infringe on our right of free speech. And for years now, states have been allowed to infringe on our right to keep and bear arms, with President Biden promising even more infringement. There's even talk of confiscating guns. Now, since the Second Amendment says you have the right to, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, how is this sort of thing possible? How can this happen in America? How can states be allowed to disregard the Bill of Rights to some degree or other? How can the federal government disregard the Bill of Rights and allow things to happen that clearly should not be happening? Why doesn't the government step in and do something? Why don't they seem to care whether or not our rights are trampled on? Why don't the American people seem to care? There aren't enough people who are getting upset about this and making their voices heard about this sort of a problem. Even if one of the rights that is being infringed upon is not something that's important to you, it is still a right that is articulated in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, and every citizen ought to stand in the defense of those rights that God has given us, even if one of those rights to you doesn't seem terribly important and not something that you're real concerned about. But think about the right to defend oneself. Why would anyone not care that people are not having that right as fully as they ought to have that right? Why would anyone want to allow someone to infringe on that right for someone else, even if it's not something you're concerned about yourself? As a citizen of the United States, shouldn't you be concerned about that? About our rights being infringed upon? Or what about the right to worship as we see fit? Maybe you're not a particularly religious person. Maybe going to church isn't something that you think is important, but it's important to a lot of other people. And since we have the very first right articulated in the Bill of Rights, in the very First Amendment, is the freedom of worship, freedom of religion, then why wouldn't that be important to all of us just on the sake of principle? Because it's a right and it's important to some people, and so that right should be defended and protected. Or what about the right to express our thoughts, the freedom of speech? And yet states are allowed to trample on your rights because some people don't seem to like the ideas that are in the Constitution, the freedoms that we're allowed. Apparently, they prefer government control over civil liberty. Well, is that really the direction we want to go in? That if you don't like what the Constitution says, you can just ignore it? Or bend it a little bit, make it a little more palatable to other people. But what that does is it just ends up denying people their rights. Well, I want to suggest to you that this is actually what's happening. This is not just a hypothetical. Our rights are being threatened in a number of different areas. Our right to keep and bear arms is being denied. Here's what it comes down to. I think a lot of people haven't thought about this, but here's what it comes down to. Any gun control is a denial of our Second Amendment rights. Now, there'll be a lot of people who go, oh, no, that's not true. We're not denying anybody their Second Amendment rights. It's just there's certain kinds of guns that you shouldn't have, and there's certain background checks that you need to go through, and there's certain kinds of ammunition requirements and this and that, and they make it all sound very respectable and very safe, because after all, they're just trying to keep everybody safe. All right, but when the government determines what kind of arms you can keep and bear, that's an infringement. Okay, when they say that you can't buy or sell a gun between two parties without them getting involved, and that's part of the gun control that's being advocated right now. If a grandfather wanted to leave a gun to his grandson, he can't do that without going to a federally licensed gun store and getting the federal government involved by doing background checks and that sort of thing. You can't even leave a gun to your children or your grandchildren without getting the government involved. Really? That to me seems like a pretty good level of infringement. Is that where we want to go? Do we want the government, whether it's the state or the federal government, to control things at that level? Think of it this way. Let's move away from the Second Amendment and gun control. Let's look at it from another point of view. Freedom of religion. Okay, what if a state says, well, we understand that the Constitution gives you freedom of religion. We get that. But in this state, we don't really like religion X. All the rest of them are okay, but religion X is not allowed here in our state. Would that be legal? Would that be a good thing for the state just to ignore what the Constitution says about freedom of religion and say, well, yeah, but not here. Here we're going to determine which religions are acceptable and which aren't. Or would we prefer that the Supreme Court at that point step in and do their job, you see, and say, hold it, folks, the Constitution says this, the Bill of Rights says this. Okay, you can't just ignore that and deny people their rights. See, states do not get to deny people their constitutional rights. But in some cases, they're doing that. How long will we let that go on? Those are our thoughts for today. I hope you found it interesting or helpful. If you did or didn't, there's a comment section where you can leave your thoughts down below. Again, let me encourage you to hit the subscribe button. That would be really helpful to us. You can share this video onto other media. That would be helpful as well. We hope you enjoyed our content and hope you will tune in again. Thank you.